X-linked dominance means that you only need one affected X chromosome in order to be affected by the trait. In this scenario, the blue button represents the dominant trait, and the purple button represents the recessive trait. The offspring of this mother and father inherit one trait from each parent. The father will pass on his X chromosome to his daughters and the Y chromosome to his son. The mother passes on an X chromosome to both her son and her daughter. For example, if the mother passes on her X-linked recessive gene and the father passes on his X-linked dominant gene, that means that this daughter inherits at least one dominant gene and she will be affected by the X-linked dominant phenotype. Now let's say the mother passes her recessive gene to her son. The father must pass on his Y chromosome, leaving the son with only the recessive trait. Therefore, the son will not display the dominant phenotype. X-linked recessiveness requires an individual to have only X-linked recessive alleles in order to be affected by the recessive trait. This same scenario can explain X-linked recessive inheritance. If the mother passes on her X-linked recessive trait to her son, and the father passes on his Y chromosome to the son, then the son is left with only the recessive trait. Therefore, he will be affected by this recessive phenotype. Y-linked traits can only be inherited from an individual's father and can only affect his sons. For example, the daughter in this scenario cannot be affected by the Y-linked trait because she does not have any Y chromosomes. However, if the father is affected with a Y-linked trait, he will pass this trait on to his son, who will in turn also be affected by the trait. Just like X-linked dominance, autosomal dominance also only requires an individual to have one dominant allele in order to be affected by the dominant trait. In this scenario, one parent is homozygous dominant and the other is homozygous recessive. All of their offspring will inherit one allele from each parent. Each of this couple's offspring will be heterozygous, meaning they have one dominant allele and one recessive allele. Because this individual has at least one dominant allele, they will be affected by the dominant phenotype. Autosomal recessiveness requires an individual to have two recessive alleles in order to be affected by the recessive trait. In this scenario, both parents could pass on the recessive alleles to their offspring. Because the offspring is homozygous recessive, they will be affected by the recessive phenotype. Due to the fact that one of the parents is heterozygous, this parent could also pass on their dominant allele instead of the recessive allele. This will leave the offspring with one dominant allele, meaning they will not express the recessive phenotype. This is the pedigree for the family. The blue boxes represent the blue-eyed phenotype, and the white boxes represent the brown-eyed phenotype. X-linked dominance is not a possible mode of inheritance. As you can see, based on the genotype, Claire should have blue eyes. However, her phenotype tells us that she has brown eyes. Y-linked traits are not a possible mode of inheritance for this trait. As you can see, based off of Joe's genotype, he should have blue eyes. However, his phenotype tells us he has brown eyes.